In the gem and jewelry world, there's a lot of vague and sometimes even misleading information. So today I'm going to cover off some of the top myths I get asked about and even that I see on social media. For decades, De Beers, the huge conglomerate that they are, did an absolutely amazing job of marketing diamonds and placing them as the ultimate luxury item. So we really couldn't help but think that natural diamonds were the rarest and by far the most expensive gemstone because they were just so incredibly rare. The truth is that good quality diamonds, especially over 1 carat, are definitely rare, but in general, diamonds are one of the more common gemstones that are found in the Earth's core. And the real expense of a diamond actually comes from how they are mined and brought out from where they originally form hundreds of miles deep within the Earth's core. It takes millions of dollars and many, many years to find diamonds on Earth and to make sure that they are going to be able to support $1 million industry. So there are lots of samples that happen over many years to make sure that the quality of diamonds and the size of diamonds that are going to come from that very, very expensive infrastructure that will be set up to mine them is going to support that business. And the truth is, it is very expensive because unlike many colored gemstones, again, diamonds are found very, very deep in the Earth's core. So extracting them is very difficult and expensive and takes a lot of manpower as well as very expensive machinery. So while natural diamonds are very special and unique gemstones with very specific characteristics that a lot of other gemstones absolutely do not have, their ultimate cost, I would say, in the last 50 to 100 years really came from the fact that they were placed in our mind as this wonderful luxury object, especially after the 40s when De Beers really marketed them as the ultimate symbol of love as a diamond engagement ring. I think in the last couple of years, it's definitely been shown that the mystique of natural diamonds has definitely decreased rapidly with the entry of lab diamonds onto the market, because in general now diamonds feel a little bit less special because they are definitely less expensive and just widely available, because yes, lab diamonds are chemically the same as natural diamonds. And I think this is going to put the spotlight on a lot of other gemstones now. People are going to be thinking outside the box a little bit more and turning to colored gemstones because they still feel more rare and more unique. Again, not dissimilar to how diamonds have been marketed, there's been a lot of marketing not only behind precious stones versus semi-precious stones and diamonds, and kind of setting them on 3 different levels as if they are somehow different. But the truth is, the only thing that sets any gemstones apart are their chemical composition and the chemical structure of the gem. So one of the things that does make diamonds unique is that they're the only gemstone to be composed of only one element. They're 100% carbon, which funnily enough is the same chemical composition as pencil lead. But the thing that makes them so unique is, of course, that they've formed naturally in the earth millions to sometimes billions of years ago, and they've been exposed to so much heat and pressure that those carbon atoms that are in the diamond are so tightly kind of bound together that it makes them the hardest material on Earth. Of course, that's incredibly unique. Every other gemstone other than diamond has a more complex chemical structure, and this is one of the reasons why they tend to be more rare, because you need that very specific combination of elements in order for these other types of crystals to form. As well, in order to get the colors of the various crystals, including even colored diamonds, it often requires trace elements, and the trace elements are usually the rarest of all. So for example, a sapphire has the chemical composition of aluminum oxide, and if there's trace titanium, the sapphire is going to be blue. If there's trace amounts of chromium, which is one of the rarest elements on Earth, you're going to get a red color, which makes the stone ruby. So technically, there's absolutely no difference between what the gemstones are classified as far as colored gems versus diamonds, and there really is no difference between what used to be called a precious gemstone or a semi-precious gemstone. Again, this was really just a marketing tactic to kind of excuse the more expensive price of sapphires, emeralds, and rubies, which is fine because they are more rare, but nowadays I would say all colored gemstones and all gemstones in general have reached a level of rarity that we really don't have to set some apart. I think there's definitely stones that we know are less rare, like that are quartz-based, for example, so your amethyst, citrine, versus something like a sapphire or an emerald. But in general, the precious versus semi-precious kind of label is definitely dated, and it really never had any specific characteristics. So a lot of consumers, I think it's very natural to connect price and rarity very specifically in your mind when it comes to jewels. However, the economics of gemstones can be very complex, especially because they can be so difficult to mine and source. And again, as I mentioned with diamonds, this is a much more complex process than probably a lot of consumers even realize. So that's why the price of gemstones is much more connected to the classic model, I would say, of supply and demand versus just pure rarity. And it's also why you can see the prices of certain gems just fluctuate wildly, even from 6 months to the next and year after year. I've personally seen this happen many times, and one of the most recent examples I would say would be with Baroque pearls. So Baroque pearls are widely available. In the past, they were kind of shunned because of their very irregular shapes. And then all of a sudden they just became very, very trendy, and even big fashion houses were using them in costume jewelry, and we kind of saw them everywhere. And going from a trade show from 1 year to the next, I think it was even less than that, maybe even 6 months, the prices went up almost 500%. It was kind of shocking. I couldn't believe it. But that's a classic example because the supply of those pearls absolutely did not change. It was just that they became very fashionable, very trendy all of a sudden, and the demand absolutely skyrocketed. So of course the price followed suit. Another classic example that I've used before is with Tanzanite. So Tanzanite is definitely considered one of the rarest gemstones on Earth. It's only been found in one place to date, which itself is very uncommon. It's only found in a very, very small area at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. So really there's nothing more rare than Tanzanite. However, partly because of this, it can't really be sourced by large jewelry companies or even designers that want to put it in a lot of very common and accessible jewelry, and they can't really market it that well because it's just there's not enough to go around to have it be in kind of larger collections. And so because it hasn't been marketed and the public hasn't been exposed to it that much, the demand for Tanzanite has never really peaked or gotten, very popular, even like a gemstone, for example, like morganite in recent years. So because of this, the demand always kind of stays stable. It never really rises. And therefore, even though it's so incredibly rare, the prices have really stayed stable as well for Tanzanite. They've really never peaked to kind of match the rarity that they have here on Earth. So in the last 10 years or so, kind of in general popular culture, there's been kind of a surge of obsession with things that are so-called natural or organic or green or eco-friendly. And I think this really brought on the huge trend for pearls because they were marketed as kind of a very natural and or organic gemstone. Of course, as I mentioned, this really applied to Baroque pearls because I think their very irregular shape allowed people to market them very easily as not being cultured perhaps, and just being kind of irregular and coming out of the ocean in this very natural way and inhibited by man. But of course, this wasn't true. The truth is that organic gems have a very specific classification in the jewelry trade, and organic applies to absolutely any gemstone that comes from a living thing. So pearls are organic, but so are coral and jet, which comes from decomposing trees, and ivory and tortoiseshell. And of course, very rightly so, many of these materials have very strict restrictions and have even been made illegal because, of course, we don't want the environment and living things to be suffering for the sourcing of these types of materials. As freshwater pearls come from mussels, and saltwater pearls are sourced from oysters. So they're organic for this reason. And a lot of people want to think of them as being natural, just like, again, in the food industry or the beauty industry, a lot of things want to be attached to being natural. However, the truth is that natural pearls really don't exist anymore. And this is because natural pearls in the trade are referred to pearls that have zero intervention from man. And the last time we really saw this happening, being sourced for jewelry, for example, was almost over 100 years ago, before the Art Deco period. And this is because culturing pearls was invented around the 20s and early 30s. Of course, pearls are still existing naturally in oysters and mussels, but it was so expensive and so incredibly difficult and often dangerous to source them that once culturing pearls was invented, it slowly just became completely out of the norm to source natural pearls, and instead it just became so easy and cheap to culture them. So while pearls used to actually be one of the most valuable gemstones because they were so rare and hard to come by, cultured pearls now are created on pearl farms. Many of them are in Asia, and they again either use oysters or mussels to have freshwater or saltwater pearls. And there is intervention with the mollusk in order to create basically a seed in order for that pearl to form. So now when you use the term natural pearls, it's referring to pearls that really only can now exist in antique jewelry. So you do sometimes find them coming up to auction. Now, all pearls that you find on the market are cultured on pearl farms, and this of course includes so-called Baroque pearls, which do have irregular shapes, and really this is only formed because the pearl hasn't created that perfectly round shape that a lot of people are looking for. It's become irregular because it's still an organic process that can't be completely controlled. Lab diamonds have become massively popular in the last few years, and the term itself, lab diamond, is interesting because of course it is a marketing term that was created in order to kind of again place a certain idea in the minds of the consumer. Of course, when someone says lab diamond, you're going to get a very specific idea in your mind, maybe of some Swiss scientists in a very beautiful lab, and they're, creating this perfect diamond. Think about it a little bit more. There are, of course, just a complete saturation of lab diamonds on the market, and of course, all of those diamonds aren't being created in a lab. Yes, when lab diamonds were originally invented in the 50s, they maybe were created in a lab because it was very difficult and expensive. But now the reason why they have infiltrated the market is because the cost and the process of creating them has become very, very cheap and easy in comparison, and especially in comparison to mining natural diamonds. The reality is that lab diamonds are being created in factories just like anything else. Many of them are in Asia, and we all know how factories work. They are often using fossil fuels in order to maintain production processes. There's a lot of staffing issues sometimes that are created, and I'm definitely not an expert in lab diamonds particularly, but I would say that this marketing idea that they are more environmentally friendly definitely needs a lot more time in order to be looked at more closely. It can definitely be easy to look at and think about mining diamonds and think about how that might not be environmentally friendly. But as I mentioned off the top of the video, mining diamonds is a huge million-dollar business, and the countries that are involved in the mining of diamonds are extremely invested in that business. And with the Kimberley process and lots of other legal restrictions and restrictions around how workers are protected, how the environment is protected. I know living here in Canada, the mining of diamonds is very, very environmentally protected. These are things that have been thought about very thoroughly in order to protect this business, and therefore it's something that has been thought out versus lab diamonds, which is very new. So in my personal opinion, it's just far too early to be comparing the two, and I think we need a lot more of long-term data in order to be able to see if one even is better than the other. They might end up actually being very similar, but one thing is for sure, that creating lab diamonds is a lot cheaper and easier than mining natural diamonds, and that is the real reason they have infiltrated the market and become so popular. And just like the process of culturing pearls, we might see natural diamonds and that whole process be abandoned at some point just because it is so expensive and so difficult. And the reality is that wearing a natural versus a lab diamond, no one can really tell the difference, and it's going to become more and more difficult, and that's really going to disrupt the industry even more. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to learn more about gems and jewelry, be sure to visit us on our main page at winstongemsandjewelry.com.